Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the earthquake that has destroyed so many lives, so many thousands of lives in Turkey and Syria, and Israel's response to that tragedy. Immediately after the initial quake that is so devastating Turkey and Syria even to this day, an urgent request for help was sent out from Turkish leadership to Israeli leadership. And literally, a few short seconds later, a legion of the most experienced and successful rescue operators in the world was wheels up and on its way to Turkey to help. When disaster strikes, Israel is ready. They sent medical teams, multiple teams of Israelis, a group of over 300 experts are on the ground in Turkey. 2 complete field hospitals with surgical wards, doctors, surgeons, laboratories, dental facilities, intensive care units, everything needed for a full level 5 trauma unit was sent. Everything that would help save lives. They sent search and rescue teams. These teams include on-site rescuers who know how to dig, dog teams, drone operators. They sent humanitarian workers, translators, social workers, psychologists, professionals who can help deal with the emotional trauma of heart-wrenching disasters like this earthquake. And they sent a unit of satellite mappers, new to this rescue legion. Now, the satellite mappers are part of the IDF Intel Unit 9900, traditionally employed to translate satellite images for special operations teams searching for terrorists. In Turkey, they are used, and they're using their technology and skills to identify living bodies buried in the rubble of destroyed buildings. As of this writing, this new technology has saved several dozen people. Time is running out. After a certain point in time, the search will transition to those who lost their lives in this earthquake and its aftershocks. Over the past 70 years, Israel has developed and perfected their life-saving techniques for natural disasters, trauma, and war. For the Jewish state, it was an issue of necessity. More than that, it was about morality. It was also about ethics. From its inception, from the time of the creation of the modern state of Israel in 1948, Israel has been faced with an awful reality of wars and of terror. With terror and with war comes devastation and damage. And because of the nature of these terror attacks and strikes against Israel, those attacks chose civilians as targets. Israel has developed an expertise in rescue missions. These skills that Israel honed have been tweaked to assist with natural disasters within their own borders and within the borders of countries worldwide. As far back as 1953, when the state of Israel was a fledgling 5 years old, and when Greece experienced an earthquake, rescue teams were sent to help. The list has since grown. Listen to this list. Mexico, Armenia, Greece, Turkey, India, Sri Lanka, Haiti, Nepal, Kenya, Armenia, Romania, Central America, Kosovo, Croatia, Hurricane Katrina, Burkina, Haiti, Japan, tsunami, Philippines, typhoons, Balkans, Chad, Argentina, the Congo, Macedonia, Egypt, Sri Lanka, Colombia, Bulgaria, Ghana, Brazil, Albania, Honduras, Ecuador, Guinea, Ukraine, and of course Surfside Miami in Florida, where Israel was front and center in that rescue. Not all the countries Israel helps are her friends. In fact, some are her sworn enemies. Syria, let's say, for instance, not on the list, although on numerous occasions, Israel has helped the Syrians with equipment, with tools and resources sent by the way of a third party, not with personnel, just as is happening right now. But when tragedy is struck close to the Syrian-Israeli border, however, Israeli medical teams have crossed into enemy territory to provide aid and sometimes even extract Syrian wounded by vehicle or even helicopter, airlifting them to trauma hospitals, especially in Sfat and Safed. Israel does not stand on the sidelines when disaster strikes. This is not the Jewish way. Israel will not stand quietly and watch innocent people die. That is not the Jewish way. Israel helps others in need. That is the Jewish way. The Talmud records an important lesson. The rabbis teach us that anyone who saves even a single life, it is as if that person saved the entire world. The lesson was learned long ago, and it is still front and center in the hearts and souls of Israel as a country and Israelis as a people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the head of the team, the rescue team, and gave him a blessing. And then Netanyahu told him that he was showing the beautiful, wonderful face of Israel to the world. Unfortunately, not everyone involved in the rescue effort wanted Israel to be a contributing force. The Israeli teams, dubbed Operation Olive Branch, are now back home in Israel, forced out of Turkey because of security threats. What a shame. What a shanda for those who jeopardized the lives of Israelis as they saved the lives of trapped innocents. No other country in the world can offer this kind of rescue service on this level. And even if they could, I am not certain that they would. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on February 12th, 2023, and it was authored by Rabbi Moshe Hauer. It's entitled, American Jewish Leaders Must Deploy Different Kind of Hyperbole on Israel, Opinion. Subtitled, As American Jewish Identity Weakens, Israel, as reflected in its representative government, is experiencing a political and religious rightward tilt. Rabbi Hauer advises readers to focus on the positive, and this is how he begins. American Jewish leaders need to deploy a different kind of hyperbole about Israel. It is time to put aside talk of the end of democracy and the onset of fascism, the deprivation of human rights, and religious coercion. Instead, we can and therefore must express our complete confidence in the enduring quality of Israel's vibrant democracy. We can and therefore must speak with pride and joy of the country that is the fulfillment of the prayers and dreams of millennia, the lone beacon of freedom in a neighborhood of horrific repression, the modern miracle from which comes forth the Torah and nourishes our nation and technology that powers the world, the Jewish national homeland miraculously reborn on the smoldering remains of the Holocaust and committed to the security of every Jew in a still hateful world. Hauer now warns Israel to recognize that diaspora Jewry is watching and learning from Israel and from their mistakes and especially from their exclamations. He continues, caution in Israel is warranted as well. While those on both sides of Israel's political divide must continue to advance their policy debates vigorously, they must recognize that on the sidelines of their political battlefield sit America's Jews, watching carefully and deciding whether they will be able to identify with the outcome. To paraphrase Echad Ha'am, more than American Jewry has maintained Israel, Israel has maintained American Jewry. For the vast majority of the diaspora Jews, it's not Judaism, but Israel, both the concern for its safety and pride in its accomplishments. That has united and galvanized them as Jews and served as the most effective anchor of their Jewish identity. Preserving that sense of identity between American Jewry and Israel is a paramount responsibility that both Israeli and American Jewish leaders must have at the top of their minds, because at this moment, that sense of identity is seriously at risk. Rabbi Hauer now concludes by explaining that Israel has extreme and heated arguments on both sides. He suggests that the diaspora should be a calming influence. He writes, the perfect storm is brewing. As American Jewish identity weakens, Israel, as reflected in its representative government, is experiencing a political and religious rightward tilt. These are opposing trends that are unlikely to reverse themselves anytime soon, and left unaddressed will undermine the identification of much of American Jewry with Israel. This problem is heightened on the Israeli side by the stridency of those in power and the exaggerated claims of the opposition. American Jewish leaders joining the political fray will only exacerbate the situation further. American Jewry and its leaders should be doing quite the opposite, bringing to our dialogue about and with Israel the comity and understanding that characterize American Jewish life and the unconditional love that has been the lasting hallmark of our cherished relationship with our beloved Israel. When God brought back the exiles of Zion, we were like dreamers. Then were our mouths filled with laughter, our tongues with joy. This is a very beautiful but totally unrealistic understanding of the situation, I must say. American Jews, as well as Israeli Jews, are locked in conflict. There's no doubt about that. Next up is another column from the Jerusalem Post. This one is written by Mark Dubowitz, and it was published on February 13th, and it's entitled, Ukraine Should Back Israel for Fighting Iran-Backed Palestinian Terror Opinion, subtitled, Russia uses Iranian-made drones in Ukraine. Iran also backs Palestinian terror attacks against Israel, including killing Ukrainians. When Israel fights Palestinian terror, it defends Ukraine. Dubowitz attempts to point out that Ukraine should be siding with Israel and instead is siding with the Palestinians. The argument makes sense. Iran is giving drones to Russia, and those drones are killing Ukrainians. Iran is giving money and arms to the Palestinians, who are killing Israelis. As such, the Ukrainians and the Israelis should be on the same page, but they're not. Dubowitz begins. Russia's use of Iranian-supplied kamikaze drones against Ukraine is, by now, notorious. Less known is the complicity of the Islamic Republic in the murder of Ukrainian citizens 2,000 kilometers away in Israel. Of the 40 people killed by the surging Palestinian terrorist attacks of the past year, 3, almost 1 in 10, were Ukrainian. Irina Korolova was milling with worshippers outside the synagogue in Jerusalem's Neve Yaakov neighborhood on a Friday evening last month when she was shot dead along with 6 Israelis by a pistol-wielding Arab from east of the capital. According to local media reports, the 60-year-old Ukrainian was working as a caregiver in Israel. Dubowitz explains that what should be natural, in this case, is not, and it is very troubling in his eyes. He writes, yet, in their common struggle against dictatorships and their terrorist proxies, Ukraine and Israel have shared interests and values. They also have shared ethnic links with tens of thousands of Ukrainians living in Israel and hundreds of thousands of Jews living in Ukraine, including Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. And even as Kiev understandably appeals for more help in the war, it should be mindful of the fact that Israel is busy fighting its own war on the streets against Tehran-backed terrorists targeting its civilians. So far, Israel has rejected Ukrainian requests to supply military aid, concerned that such weaponry could fall into Russian hands, divert those systems needed for Israel's defense, and spur Moscow to deny Israel the ability to target Iranian assets in Syria. Russia has again warned Israel about providing arms to Ukraine, saying that anyone providing weapons will be considered legitimate targets for Russian armed forces. This Russian threat was in response to a statement this week by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that he is considering providing military support to Kyiv. But Israel has already taken steps to support Ukraine in other ways. It has taken in thousands of Ukrainian war refugees, struck at the Iranian ability to arm Russian President Vladimir Putin with drones and missiles, provided Ukraine with valuable intelligence, and sent Ukraine armed ambulances and other humanitarian aid. And this is how the column concludes, which is important. He writes, Dubowitz writes, when Israel fights back against Iran and Iran-backed Palestinian terrorism, it is acting in Ukraine's defense as well. Kiev needs to recognize that publicly and unequivocally. It also helps strengthen the case for Israeli military support as well. Points well made. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 5 cartoons today. The first cartoon pokes fun at the political divide in the United States. It uses the Super Bowl as a vehicle. The barkeeper asks 2 patrons, Who do you want to win the Super Bowl? Red state or blue state? The famous 3 rules about real estate are 1 location, 2 location, 3 location. Location, location, location. In this cartoon, 2 Girl Scouts are selling cookies, Girl Scout cookies, outside the pot store. The name of the store is We Are the Champions. We see someone walking carrying piles of cookies. One Girl Scout says to the other, "And this is how I got my badge for marketing." Smart marketing indeed. Everyone knows that when people are high, they get the munchies and need to nosh, in this case, on Girl Scout cookies. Next up is a cartoon about the famous spy balloons, comparing them to TikTok. We see a big balloon emblazoned with the words TikTok, and from the balloon emanates a voice asking, "The Chinese collecting information on Americans? What's the big deal? We do it all the time." In other words, TikTok is already doing it. So what's the big deal about the balloon? I love this next cartoon. It's a play on a dilemma we all face all too often. We see a magician performing a magic act in a circus. He's also a mind reader, and he announces his next trick. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, for my next trick, I will attempt to correctly remember my password." And that is truly hilarious. Next, we have President Zelensky of Ukraine addressing the European Parliament. Standing behind the podium, he says, "We are fighting for your values." Roberto Mazzola, the President of the European Parliament, turns toward the head of the European Union, Ursula Gertrude Albrecht, and asks, "He doesn't mean corruption, does he?" That's truly the case, unfortunately. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Jerusalem police detained a 35-year-old woman who took off her clothes and roamed around the Western Wall Plaza, the Kotel Plaza, wearing nothing but her underwear. The woman chose to disrobe as protest against the bill proposal that was floated last week by the ultra-Orthodox Shas party. The proposal would impose a penalty of 6 months in prison and a fine for anyone who visits the Western Wall Plaza in inappropriate attire or behaves in a disrespectful way. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi will be visiting China for a 3-day trip at the invitation of his counterpart Xi Jinping. In December, Raisi pledged to remain committed to deepening a strategic partnership between Iran and China during a meeting he held with Chinese Vice Premier Hu Chuhua in Tehran itself. China has been dramatically increasing its trade with Iran, and this has permitted Iran to sustain itself, buoy itself, despite the Western sanctions imposed on them by the United States and her allies. An unnamed hacker group launched an overnight cyber attack against servers and computer systems at the Technion Institute of Technology in Haifa. According to a statement issued by the Technion, the computing systems are undergoing maintenance and have been disconnected purposefully. The hackers demanded $1.3 million in bitcoins to return control of the computers. If it's not paid, they claim they will release the material to the public on the World Wide Web, on the internet. The Israeli military has reported that a single rocket was fired towards Israel from Gaza Strip, and it was intercepted by Israeli aerial defense systems. The siren sounded in the Israeli border communities, sending Israelis running to bomb shelters. Israeli leadership promised to seek out the source of the rocket and destroy it. The German government has acknowledged an increase in spying by Iranian intelligence agencies in and on exiled Iranians living in Germany since the start of the mass protests last year. Germany's Welt am Sonntag, a newspaper, reported that the Iranian agents are active in the country. As we know, nationwide, protests in Iran were triggered by the death in September of a young woman detained by the Iranian morality police, and they've been spiraling on ever since. German sources within the government told the newspaper that their own domestic intelligence service had identified, get this number, 160 individuals with links to Germany as well as to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. The Revolutionary Guards' extensive spying activities are directed, they say, in particular, against pro-Israeli and pro-Jewish targets in Germany as well. According to the French Foreign Ministry, French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna told her U.S. counterpart, Antony Blinken, that there must be stronger response, an international response, to the threat posed by Iran's ballistic missile program. The French Foreign Ministry said Colonna and Blinken had a telephone conversation during which they discussed wide-ranging topics, including Ukraine and Iran. They also discussed the need for Iran to fully cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is reporting that Tehran has inconsistent in its meeting its nuclear obligations. France has finally lost their patience and has finally become strict on this question. The French want Iran to comply. The Mount Hermon ski resort in Israel has opened its doors to visitors. Temperatures on the mountain are very low and strong winds are blowing. There is a heavy traffic and backups leading up to the entrance to the site. The entry tickets have all run out. They're sold out. While there is some natural snow dusting, the mountain ski runs there are packed with machine-generated snow. Despite the traffic and the crowds and the waiting time, Israelis are enjoying the downhill. They love to ski on the Hermon. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky recently said that his country had intercepted plans by Russian secret services to destroy the country of Moldova. Speaking to European Union leaders in Brussels, Zelensky said he recently told Moldovan President Maya Sandu about the alleged scheme, speaking through a translator. The Ukrainian president said, "I have informed her that we have intercepted the plan of the destruction of Moldova by the Russian intelligence." Zelensky added that the documents showed who, when, and how the plan would break the democracy of Moldova and establish control over Moldova. According to Zelensky, the plan was very similar to the one devised by Russia to take over Ukraine, but he did not know whether Moscow ultimately ordered the plan to be carried out. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov charged that the West was considering turning Moldova into another Ukraine. He alleged that the West backed the 2020 election of the pro-Western Sandu, claiming that she is eager to take the country into NATO, eager to merge Moldova with Romania, and he said is ready for anything. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the Bible in Leviticus 19:16 commands us to not stand idly by while your neighbor's blood is pouring? This is a biblical command and a Jewish value. It is also a law enacted by the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, on June 22, 1998. The law is called, in Hebrew, Lo Ta'amod al Dam Re'echa law. Can you imagine a law in any other country that quotes both the Bible and the Talmud and is explained in the law using Talmud and medieval Jewish commentary? I'm going to quote from the law itself. It reads, "A person is obliged to proffer assistance when able to do so without endangering himself or his fellow to a person who, in close proximity, and following a sudden event, is subject to a serious and immediate danger to his life, his person, or his health." B. If that person notifies the authorities or calls upon another person who can proffer the required assistance, then he shall be deemed as though he proffered assistance for the purpose of this law. This section, authorities, the police, the ambulance services, Magen David Adom, and the firefighting services. 2A. The provisions of Section 5 of the unjust enrichment law shall apply, notwithstanding that person providing the benefit acted in accordance with his obligation under Section 1. And then the court may order a party responsible for causing the danger that the rescued person was subject to, including the rescued person himself, if he caused the danger, to indemnify the person who proffered assistance according to the obligation under this law, Section 1. And that's the Good Samaritan clause, by the way. Save as otherwise provided in Section 2 of the provisions, the law shall not derogate the provisions of any other, and it goes on and on and on. And then it goes into effect in 40 days, and it's signed by the Prime Minister of Israel, the Minister of Justice, the President of the State, and the Speaker of the Knesset. After that, there are explanatory notes to the law, which was drafted by Hanan Porat. And then the explanatory notes explain through all kinds of things like the Gemara, the Talmud itself, what it means and how it connects. It's actually remarkable to think about this. It's truly unbelievable. It's remarkable to think that the law in Israel is quoting not just the Bible, but also the Talmud and also medieval thinkers, all in order to understand and obligate people to act and not to stand idly by when someone is hurt. It's not about being a bystander. It's being an active participant in saving the world. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.